The World Economic Forum may be one of the most evil businesses in the whole world, but to understand why, we need to dig a bit deeper. Why is this seemingly for good organisation potentially one of the worst in the whole world? Well, there are a few things hidden about this company which we need to look at in greater detail as we go through this video. But first, let's start off by looking at who the WEF actually is. The World Economic Forum, also known as the WEF, is an international, non-governmental and lobbying organisation based in Switzerland. It was founded back in 1971 by a German engineer, and we can see the foundation is mostly funded by its 1,000 member companies. Now, a key detail is this: these member companies typically are global enterprises with more than $5 billion in turnover. So the whole idea of this is to improve the state of the world by engaging business, political, academic and other leaders of society to shape global, regional and industry agendas. Seemingly a very good organisation, right? So where does the evil come into this? It may sound very nice and friendly and the concepts themselves are great, but let's have a look at how this actually plays out in the real world. Well, we're going to start off with this concept: you will own nothing and be happy. But don't worry, so this is what we have seen: you'll own nothing and be happy, based on the input of members of the World Economic Forum's Global Future Councils. Now, they have stated that the WEF doesn't have a goal to remove anyone's private property by 2030. As addressed in the previous Reuters fact checks, this claim likely originated from a WEF social media video from 2016 that stated 8 predictions about the world in 2030, including the fact that you will own nothing and you will be happy about it. The whole idea is that you will rent things and it will be delivered by drone. Ah, okay, well that's all of our problems solved, right? Wrong. Let's have a look at how this is really a great cause for concern. The problem with this concept is simply this: whilst I agree they may not want to directly remove property and assets, let's have a look at the effects of what is happening and how this is playing into the agenda. Prices being sky high in most of the markets, the financial markets being very high, the housing market being at all-time highs, and therefore people are incentivized less to buy and more to rent because they simply cannot afford to buy property, for example, at these high prices. So people say, well, we can't afford this mortgage, let us just rent. Now this has been made a very attractive option due to cost, and now more and more things are becoming to the point where they are rented, they are leased, they are on finance. It used to be the fact that you would buy a house on a mortgage, which is fairly okay. A house is an expensive asset, and as things went up in value, well, it's more attractive now to finance a car. It's more attractive now to get your mobile phone on a contract rather than buying it outright. You see how this is all working. And again, we are seeing other things being directly rented, which again is even potentially worse. And the reason for this is it leaves you at the mercy of the landlord or the individual who rents the asset out to you. Now, major problems can arise there. I gave the example of getting the bus versus getting in your own car. You have to wait for the bus to come, you have to pray that the supplier of the bus is going to be running in an appropriate way, whereas in your own car you know when it's going to arrive because you're driving it. And this dependence on others to provide services is where it gets very terrifying. I'm not saying that the goal is this, but let's have a look at what could happen. The potential problems here are huge. Problems that could arise for individuals, but also for entire nations and the whole world. We are seeing things in Russia right now. Now, whether you think it is right or wrong, we've seen big brands being cancelled out of Russia, effectively leaving the country in a state of being cancelled. So whether you think that's right or wrong, look at how fast it happened. No, Netflix and McDonald's may not be the biggest deal in the world over there, but let's have a think about how this can apply. Imagine if we rented or relied on somebody else for everything. In the nightmare scenario, you would have the potential of having no house, no car, no means of transportation, no deliveries if you are not an eligible candidate. And eligibility criteria presumably would go back to the potential person who is renting it out. And that is where the real cause for concern, in my opinion, does lay. We just have to put our trust in these individuals who could potentially deny us at any point. And there are real-term consequences of not owning stuff. Now, as I always say, do what you think is right for you. If you don't want to own a house or car, that's completely fine. If renting makes you happy, that's great. But in theory, this could be dangerous. So the whole idea is the less people that buy, the price goes down, right? Well, not necessarily. Because the demand is still high, because people still want to live somewhere, but somebody else owns the property. So what happens there is we have this transfer of wealth and power. The power is now in the landlord's hands, as they can just do whatever they like with this property. If they want to kick you out, that is potentially something on the table. Now, thinking about other things, let's think about the wealth scenario, okay? If everybody rents everything, and I keep going back to the example of houses because it is one of the most easy to explain. If everybody rents their property, what is going to happen? We're going to be seeing the people who own assets get richer, whereas people who are renting, they don't have any equity in that asset, they don't have anything in it apart from the fact that they just live there. And that is where we are seeing the power transfer to the landlord and also the wealth, because it will not be the poor people who are going to be renting things out. It's going to be the rich and the people in big business. And you can see how this now ties in a very scary way. And we're already seeing big investors build more homes to rent out. And here's where the real con turns its head. It's endorsed by some of the biggest names in the world, this agenda from the WEF. So why are they promoting an agenda which is made to help us? Have the rich and powerful tended to help the poor and needed in the worst times in history? Well, not really. The problem with this is simple. If we all rent, somebody has to own it. If 99% of us rent things, somebody has to own that, and that will be 1% of people. These people will build wealth, as it will not be the poor who are able to rent things out. And whilst that may be for innocent reasons, in the past year we have seen house prices have skyrocketed to a point where people can't afford to buy them anymore. But who is doubling down in this market? The rich are. And that's where the scary point comes back in. We see this endorsement from the biggest names. We see this continuation building of property, this continuation building of investment in rentable assets. And let's just have a think about it. Going back to the original point which we mentioned just a few minutes ago. The organization is funded by membership. Restricting membership by financial status to the wealthiest people and companies in the world means one thing is going to happen. These companies are going to have more say because they will be feeding into the agenda, giving more opinion. Whereas the actual people who it affects, the 99% of people, are mainly influenced by the agenda of these 1,000 member companies. Again, some of the richest in the world with turnover of more than $5 billion. And the question is, all of this money that funds the organization, where on earth does it actually go? That is a very good question. And just remember when we're thinking about this, all of this money, all of this power, it can corrupt. People can be bought. Things can be bought. And that is why we need to stay vigilant. So I'm not trying to make this video to hate on the WEF. Like I keep saying, let's assume that they have good intentions. But let's also look with another opinion. Not necessarily a bad opinion, not necessarily a bearish opinion, but just a different opinion. It never hurts to look at both sides of the coin. Look at how the potential of everything being rented out could be very detrimental for all of us. So like I said, I'm not trying to hate on these, I'm not trying to disrespect the organization, but what I am saying is this. There are some aspects which are quite worrying. The potential of not owning anything for the majority of people. Somebody will still have to own it. And the question that I'm just simply trying to ask is who? As we are seeing these tumultuous times right now, as the divide between the rich and the poor seems to be ever increasing, it is the perfect time to ask these questions. Because it does appear to be the case that us, the 99% of people, are being priced out of things, whether it's via inflation, whether it's by simply natural asset prices rising. People, the general man on the street, cannot afford to buy the things that he once could. And what is the consequence of that? Well, these people turn into renters. They turn into people who buy things on finance. And whilst there is nothing necessarily wrong with that, it is still a cause for concern. The physical purchasing power that has been taken away from the average person in the last 50 or so years. So, hopefully this has just been something for you guys to think about, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for joining me all the way till the end. I'll see you again.